Welcome to Unlimited Realities. I'm your host, Lisa Zimmer, and today I am very, very honored to have a special guest with us, Somatic Psychotherapist, Healing and Intimacy Guide, CENK Matalon. Thank you so much for coming and joining us on Unlimited Realities, CENK.
Hi, Lisa. Good to be here with you.
And it is just a wonderful topic to have. I've never spoken with anybody about sacred intimacy before on my show. And I
Mm.
find it such a timely um, presence in regard to where we are today in our relationships, where we want to be and go in our relationships. So let's talk first about, can you tell us what sacred intimacy is? A lot of people think intimacy is sex, and we need to change the dynamic there.
Yes, I've been looking deeply at relationships for almost 20 years now since my very first breakup. And something that's become more and more obvious to me in our world is that we have lost sacredness. In the workplace, we've lost it. In the living room, in the bedroom, you mentioned sex now, right? Everything's taken to be consumed. We
Right.
consume experiences, not only material goods, right? And so sacred intimacy to me means we bring back a sense of reverence, a sense of honoring. And sacred intimacy within is one journey through healing journey, through awakening, through getting in touch with all the parts of ourselves. And then sacred intimacy with a romantic partner in a romantic, emotional, sexual, spiritual relationship is the way that the internal intimacy can express itself.
And you discuss a lot about awakening in regard to sacred intimacy because there is a certain element of our soul's awakening in this process. Um, how do you often use this in the spiritual teachings in regard to this word when talking about romantic relationships, awakening to our humanity?
Yes, I've been a very strong Buddhist practitioner for almost 20 years, going to 10-day silent retreats and teachers, different teachings from all around the world, different traditions. And in spirituality, of course, this word awakening has a lot of weight. It's a very important word. It's like enlightenment. It's some kind of absolute reality,
Right.
the transcendent reality. But there's also awakening through our humanity. And if that is not through love, and if that is not through love between human beings, what can it be about? To me, it's definitely about that. In that sense, I feel very close to Sufism. And for example, Rumi's story, how
Right.
his love with Shams and Shams gets murdered and his heart then breaks to a million pieces through the heartbreak, through a full encounter with his own very human experience of grieving the loss of his mentor and best friend. He becomes enlightened, according to the story. He gets in touch with divine unconditional love, not because he's trying to reach enlightenment, some kind of disconnected, up in the air transcendence, not
Right.
connected with one's humanity, but he is awakening into his humanity, his vulnerability. And through the heartbreak, through the breaking open of our very human heart,
Right.
very tender, pain able, hurt able, vulnerable human heart, very limited. Through
Yes.
that pain, he opens to something transcendent. And that to me is healthy transcendence. To me, that kind of awakening is all inclusive, awakening through one's humanity into something profound.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yet so very rare is it that the individual can go to the depths of that kind of uncovering of their soul, their feelings, their emotions, the depths of accepting that grief, because a lot of people will bypass feelings that are difficult. There's
Yeah.
there's many ways. But blessed is the soul who digs deeply. I mean, it's not an easy dig. It's a very difficult. It's a
It's
very
very difficult.
very
Yes, it is.
difficult. Yes, it is.
And,
That-
when I talk about these days and people listen to me, sometimes groups of 20, 30 people, I'm in Bali now, in person, they come to this workshop, the same name, Sacred Intimacy, and they ask me a question. I say, I will never minimize being human on the planet, wanting to live consciously is very difficult. I
Yes,
never minimize that. It really is that difficult
yes,
because living consciously means here we are and we're showing up. We're
that's
showing up not only for the excitement or the orgasm or the pleasure or the joy or the food or the drinks, but we're also showing up for what loss is.
right.
Because from the moment we are born into not only being, becoming, but also decaying and loss.
Yes,
And
yes,
it's all one thing. It's the one cannot be without the other. The
that's
whole
right.
human experience. So when we show up for the whole thing, wow, what a massive undertaking to be conscious.
It really is. That's so beautifully said, Jenk. It's so beautifully said. It's that piece of you can't have light without the darkness, and it's that balance of strength and courage that comes in regard to it.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
I look at the Dalai Lama, right? The Dalai Lama to me, is like a North Star, a guiding principle. I remember, whenever I think about the Dalai Lama and his innocence and his playfulness, this person has been exiled from his motherland, right? And he's an activist. He's very aware of a lot of things. And yet there is tremendous joy in him.
right,
But
right.
my deepest sense is that he can be like that because he's so open to every emotion.
That's right.
He's so deeply healed. He's so deeply grieved. I remember one interview where they asked him about one of his best friends who died years ago, maybe 10 years. And in the interview, they said, do you still miss him? Do you still feel sad? He said, why would I not be? I miss him every day. I feel sad all the time.
Right.
Like this kind of openness to our profound, tender, fragile, vulnerable humanity. This is incredible. And it seems like when we open that much, the joy is right there and it's nowhere else.
That's right.
The
It
joy is
is.
in the openness. The
It
joy
is
is
in
not
that.
the opposite of grief. Yeah,
Yes,
these are not opposites.
that's right. It's the vulnerability
Yeah.
that deepens us. It's that raw vulnerability of where we can be ourselves in our grief and our emotion moment by moment and absorb it and integrate it into our lives, because it changes us certain aspects. It's not like it leaves us. And and I'm really drawn to your work, the somatic aspects of your work, because I understand how grief and trauma can exist in the body. And a lot of your work is in releasing it. Is that correct? In using.
Yes, working with it, going going through it, but also fully embodying it because our emotions, I see them as messengers. I've been feeling like the past 10 years, my emotions have been my teachers.
Yes,
And it's extremely humbling to become a teacher of our own internal processes.
right.
And every single emotion is another part of our functioning humanity. It's also humanness. It's also very practical. If I don't know my healthy shame, how can I apologize from my heart?
Right.
If I don't know my healthy anger, how can I say no to somebody from my heart again, vulnerably? How can I say no if someone's trying to hurt me or we talked about something and they keep on insisting? So healthy boundaries, healthy anger. If I don't know my fear, how can I know the unknown?
Right.
To step into the unknown, to live in a spacious and fluid and truly free way, existentially and spiritually, we need to walk through the fear, through that contraction. So
Absolutely.
really getting in touch with all emotions, and that's been bringing me much closer to the core vulnerability of being human. And Lisa, something that's been like a miracle in my life, especially the last 6 months, but also a huge thing that shakes me to my core because it's been such a shocking realization. As a man, right, as a human being with a male conditioning,
Right.
as a man, I could have never known. I could have never guessed. I could have never known that everything I've always been looking for, and this is a big claim, but it's true. That's how it feels. Everything I've been looking for is inside my own vulnerability.
Yes.
Everything I've been seeking has always been there, has always been within the deepest places in my own human heart.
Mm.
I'm not gonna spiritualize what I'm saying because
Right.
what I'm talking about is a profoundly human thing.
Right. Right. That's um that's wrapping it up in such a profound bow of completion in that piece of vulnerability, because we learn so much in our vulnerability. There's so many layers of awareness and compassion that we can gift ourselves in our vulnerability. Um,
Yes.
and I don't think we learn that easily. Our own compassion to self.
I don't think either. It's as if we get really lucky somehow, let's just say that, I feel like I've gotten really lucky that many times in my life I didn't get what I wanted. Okay.
Right.
And so when we don't get what we want, let's say at a romantic relationship, and I've had many, where despite the love, despite the effort, despite whatever good intentions, it doesn't work, for
Right.
example, or a job I'm applying, or I want to be much further ahead in my career. I want to do retreats all over the world, but it's not happening. For example, all that loss does something to our sense of personal will or willfulness.
Yes.
And through the softening and dissolving of that, there is we are some of us can have this luxury of being brought face to face with what is instead of what I want it to be. And
And
this
that
encounter with what is very humbling.
absolutely. There's a piece of that in our vulnerability that takes us to our core. It
And
enriches us
brings
in a
us to our
profound.
knees.
Right.
Exactly.
Yes.
And it brings us to our knees. And when I'm on my knees, and it happens more and more these days, I'm I'm much closer to the ground on which everything happens, right?
Yes. Yes.
There's something so beautiful. I have a Jewish background. I've never felt religious in my life, but I have a Jewish Spanish heritage, Sephardic Jews. But I was born in Istanbul, Turkey. I'm fully Turkish and I feel Turkish. And
Okay.
in Islam, what a beautiful thing when they sit on the ground, on the floor, and they pray like that, right? I
Yes.
find that so beautiful. Also, I love Sufism a lot and Rumi and Hafiz. So there's something amazing when we are brought to our knees because we can kiss the ground on which we live,
That,
finally.
that's a beautiful analogy, and it's true. It's that gift of it's okay to be vulnerable, and that's also a message
Yeah.
we haven't been gifted with. We have been told buck up, you know soldier on. It's not good
That
to
is a
show your
weakness.
weakness. Yes, it's a
That
weakness,
is a
but
weakness.
right.
For the longest time, I thought that it was women who were afraid of being vulnerable, afraid for their safety. But us men, we are just as afraid
Right.
of our own vulnerability
Sure.
and of our own safety as well, because male to male violence is something very real as well in the
Right.
world. When
Right.
when people open up to me, other men, as friends, as clients, in groups, one on one, when they are really honest, they say, "Yes, I'm afraid of other men. I'm
Right.
afraid of being kicked. I'm afraid of being, tossed around or punched at the bar, and I don't feel safe." And but what I'm getting at is, I could have never known as a man that not only that vulnerability is not a weakness, but that everything I've always been looking for was
Right.
inside the tenderness of my own heart. And, love has always been huge for me in my life since that very first breakup around age 21. I made what is love, the biggest question of my life at that time.
Okay.
And then first I looked for the answer at spiritual teaching, and then I started my own healing. So love as a resource, love as strength, when I'm connected with my heart and I'm loving towards somebody, love as strength and power has always been obvious to me. But vulnerability as power, vulnerability as strength, I could have never known. Never.
Right.
I could
It
have never known to look there for what I was seeking.
and again, that's the you can't have the light without the dark. You can't have the awakening without the pain or the heartache or the delving deeply in contemplation to really uncover this kind of vulnerability and openness of our soul, because it really expands our soul in the vulnerability. It makes
Yeah, and
you know it really enriches
yes,
us.
I call it the unguarded heart. And
Oh,
it's like,
nice.
oh my God, finally I can feel.
Right, right.
Finally, I don't have to be this armored, numb man living in my head in the insecure security of my own mind, right? In the
Absolutely.
illusory security and safety of my own mind, trying to control everything. But how about embracing the ultimate uncontrollability of life, that there's absolutely no guarantees and we are in a free fall, no
Right.
matter who we are, no matter where we are, no matter how much money we have or anything. We are always in a free fall, right? There's this story where the master says to the disciple, this is student, I have one good news, one bad news. The bad news is we are falling and we don't have a parachute. The good news is there is no ground. But the fact that the truth is we are falling and we don't have a parachute.
Right,
Wow.
right,
That's really scary, but also it's exhilarating.
right,
Once we can really embody the fact that there is no ground, ultimately we're not going to lose anything in other ways. In other words,
right,
there's nothing to lose in an ultimate sense. So can we live in this free fall of excitement slash fear, of tenderness and vulnerability, of kind of really not knowing what the next thing is, because we never know. The true condition of our lives is that we never know. And
right,
to know is impossible. To know the future, to know something that actually doesn't exist.
right.
Future is imagination.
It's complete free will and choice. And there's this piece that I hear in this evolution, and it really comes down to a lot of trust and a lot of faith within self in regard to the free fall, because as we're moving through these dynamics in our lives of understanding our vulnerability, ourselves, and the world around us, it's the perception of the fall that might need to change, because our initial perception
Yes.
is that freak out, oh dear God, we're falling, this,
Uh-huh.
grab a hold of whatever we can that's going to bring us security. And what's bringing us security is the knowing of the fall and getting comfortable in the uncomfortable. It's that.
Yes. So when the fear comes, because the fear is going to be there in that moment, instead of being afraid of my fear,
Right.
double that, then suddenly there's a fear sandwich. It's like a double fear, right? Or instead
Absolutely.
of being ashamed of my fearfulness, let's say as a man, I shouldn't be afraid, or the inner critic comes and we feel ashamed. Instead of that, can I turn towards my fear and breathe into it
Right.
and go
And
like, okay, here's another moment of contraction. And if I need to go for a run, I'll do that. If I need to go for a walk in the woods, breathing deeply, I do that. Maybe I'll journal. Maybe I'm gonna do a meditation practice or call a friend I trust and say, hey, I'm feeling afraid. Can I share something with you for 10, 15 minutes?
right.
It's about working with it, turning towards it. And then it
Absolutely.
softens, it becomes life energy. And then the next thing, right? The fear dissolves and we continue our day. And sometimes it's that simple. In 10, 20 minutes, it can dissolve.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's
Yeah,
it's wonderful examples that you gave there, because so many times we do need to physically, get out of ourselves.
the mind.
Right,
Yeah,
right. And physically as well, a good run is a great endorphin shift for.
absolutely. I completely agree. And it's not because we're trying to get rid of the fear or distract,
Right.
but we are getting more embodied.
Yes.
That's why the run works.
Yes.
And then once I'm more embodied, or I hit the gym doing the weights for 30 minutes, whatever, and then I come home, take a shower, now I am less in my head, more in my body. I am actually closer to the fear. I can work with it more skillfully now.
Yes.
Now maybe I'll do my journaling. Now maybe I'll close my eyes and drop into deeper meditation
And find solutions.
and stay with the fear and hold the fear as a little boy. So here is the young part of me. Here's the wounded little child where the source of the fear is. It comes from all the way back. And the fear will always feel very familiar to us. And can I hold him? Can I be with him? Instead of thinking that instead of thinking that the child in me is a problem I need to fix.
Right. Right.
I used to be so ashamed of my vulnerability, seeing that as a weakness.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because
Interesting.
that's the male conditioning.
Yes, yes. How far you've
Yes,
come.
exactly. I mean, and it hasn't been easy at all. But so going back to relationship, imagine a relationship where two people are willing to embody their humanity in the most beautiful ways possible, and they are also creating sacred intimacy within themselves with their different emotions and pains and traumas, whatever internal aspects they might have. And they want to bring that reverence and honoring also in their love with each other. What an incredible thing. To me, this
Yes.
is the leading edge of what love can be.
Right.
Because this is an adventure in consciousness. This is an adventure in let's explore how close we can get together without losing ourselves.
Right. It's
And
it's
as we do that, everything will come to the surface.
it's a bit of bringing the heaven to earth in regard to our sacred relationships. It's creating a different dimension in how we relate to each other.
I
Um,
completely agree. And Jesus pointing to his heart, right, in statues.
yes.
Because the moment you said heaven, just 3 seconds ago, I thought about Jesus's burning heart.
Yes.
Because heaven is the heart,
Right.
living from the heart without leaving the heart. To me,
Absolutely.
that's heaven. And where the a committed long-term love relationship, romantic relationship with an equally devoted partner, equally committed to healing and love partner. Wow. Is there any closer or is there any more intense container than that
No.
for the actualization of love as well as the challenge of love to be faced?
Right. Right.
Because in the name of love, I'm trying to love my girlfriend, but suddenly I get aggressive. Suddenly I'm shutting down. Suddenly I feel numb. I don't know what I don't know what I'm feeling. But that's part of the journey too, to look at that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's
And
never
it's so
going.
humbling because it's so difficult.
Well, it's never going to be a linear line of, or even a consistent climb, because with relationships and in deepening in relationships, there's always those new levels to grow through, and you don't want it to stay the same because it would become boring. So you know you
Yeah,
have to be challenged a little bit, but relationship,
exactly.
it's that growth of the challenges. It's like, if your relationship and your arguments or your disagreements are staying the same, there's not an evolution in the relationship. You're not digging deeply enough in the vulnerability to explore that, to expand upon the arguments.
And all the different layers of yeah, why did you use that specific word and that tone, right? Like,
Right, right.
yeah, and And suddenly things can become really hilarious as well, right? Like after chewing the same argument for the fifth time or the 10th time in the last 2 hours with a partner, I mean, things can get really funny too, because here
Absolutely.
we are, here we are so obsessed with why did you say that and how could you do it? Okay, well, at one point it becomes funny. And I think when the joy comes, when the lightness comes, the trust deepens as well.
Yes.
Safety deepens.
Yes.
And such a beautiful thing to be able um, to step into the possibility, at least, that this kind of relationship is even possible on Earth today.
That's right. Because what do we
Yeah,
see in relationships today? It's not, we need to see more of the empowering, encouraging, equal, loving sacredness in relationships, because so often we see relationships being taken for granted, and
yeah.
not really honored in the respect of the soul level of the
And
connection.
fully honoring each other's uniqueness. Like we're
Yes,
not trying to become the same person. We're not
right,
trying to kind of get homogenous in the soup of us. No, in the healthy us, there is me, my partner, and us. There's three things.
right.
And us includes me and her, but we're not dissolving into the us. We have our healthy boundaries. And then in this kind of depth, each person becomes much more fully who they are because they are given permission and the spaciousness psychologically in the relationship to fully flower in their uniqueness. Because that's honoring, that's respect.
Absolutely. And this brings me into a great segue of the next question for you in regard to, the sacredness of relationships. We've been talking about it but not really talking about it. The personal healing that must go on individually within each person, full within relationship, like the
I think it's
importance.
huge.
Yes, how important that is, because
Yeah,
it's a
because,
complete
yes,
things, right? It's
because for as long as I'm not doing that, I'm going to blame my partner for my pain.
exactly.
Wow, the moment that happens, and if it continues, that's the beginning of the end of the relationship,
Yes,
regardless of how much love there is,
right,
or regardless of how many plans have been made for the future, or how long we've been together. If I
right.
don't want to take responsibility, or I can't, or for whatever reason, I blame my pain on my partner, there's something very big I'm not seeing. What I'm not seeing is my own suffering.
Yes, yes,
So huge. I think that's really big. And
yes,
I work with couples too. So often, what happens in couples therapy is at least one of the partners drags the other one into couples therapy.
right.
Well, from the get-go, both people are not willing to look at their own personal contributions.
True.
So they think that somehow it's the relationship is the problem or each other are the problem. If
Yes,
only the other person can change this pattern suddenly. No, each individual healing is much more important. That's the bigger journey
right,
than looking at the connection in couples work. Yes, connection is important, but without the individuals both going very deeply into their unique individual healing, we can look at the connection forever, but for as long as they don't take responsibility for their own pain and traumas, the relationship is not going to deepen.
right, right. And what do you think are the biggest obstacles that prevent us from truly knowing, uh you know the for me, I would say it's like the trust piece in regard to evolving trust to dip into vulnerability in sacred intimacy. But what would you say is the biggest block that people have to prevent them from connecting sacredly?
I think for a lot of men, and I'm going to speak directly as a man myself, numbness.
Ah,
When I work with my clients, when I ask them, okay, what are you feeling? Mostly men say, I don't know.
uh-huh,
I don't know what I'm feeling. In fact, when we explore that a little more, that I don't know, we find out, and I've been finding out in myself as well, actually, I'm feeling numb.
Right.
I'm feeling numb because I cannot somehow define it as an emotion. Well, it's not anger, it's not sadness, it's not fear, it's not guilt, it's not shame, it's not joy, happiness. I just think I'm not feeling anything, but it's actually numbness, and numbness is a feeling.
Right. Right.
So the more that we stay with the numbness, again, compassionately, patiently, kindly, turning towards the numbness, it begins to get unfrozen. It
Right.
begins to move more. It begins to be more transparent, more fluid. And within the numbness, just like within depression, within anxiety, there's a whole group of emotions are there.
Right.
And slowly but surely, all that starts to move. So I'm no longer feeling numb maybe after 10 minutes, or with a client after 10 minutes into the session, they're no longer feeling numb. Suddenly they feel afraid, or
Right.
maybe a loneliness comes to the surface.
Right.
10 minutes later, maybe they're feeling angry at their father for whatever happened 10 years ago.
Sure.
We
Sure.
work with that. Maybe 20 minutes later, they're crying. They're crying the tears from 10 years ago that they never could process because there was no support that back then.
And
So what started as numbness suddenly became everything else.
are you finding that men are also in the midst of going through a rapid transformation because of what our society is kind of thrust
Huge,
men into right now, you know?
huge. There's also a lot of confusion.
Yes, that's what I was
Well,
getting to, is the
yeah,
confusion with
because,
it, how they were raised and what they're
yeah,
expected to be today.
exactly. And women are also expecting more from men now,
Yes, yes.
as they should. I think that's great, right? I mean,
I
everybody
think it
should
is.
expect a little more from each other. That's what I think, you
I
know?
do too, but I also think that there's a learning curve and a compassion in
Yeah.
regard to getting there, that we can't just whip a, you know, crack
Yes.
our whip and and say this is what I demand, because you've got centuries of a patriarch that has been a dominance in righteousness and
Yeah.
not really looking at the equality of both sexes. And so we have to kind of shift
Yes.
so much in that mindset. And
And
I
I
mean,
think,
women can be a little assertive in their own right.
yeah, and I think, for men, as men, we try to get a lot of our validation
Yes,
through being attractive to women, for example.
of
Or we're trying to get a lot of validation with the fact that, okay, I can provide for her. Okay, that's great. But more and more women, they want more than just a provider. They
right,
want more than just someone who can afford things, who can give them for
right.
material things and finances and money. They want also companionship. They want emotional literacy. They want depth. They want connection. And I think we should all be wanting a lot of things from each other, because then the heroine in us gets motivated because we want to give. That's the nature of love. Love wants to give.
Right.
Devotion wants to go towards the other to create an amazing life together for both genders, all genders. And
Yes.
for a lot of women, I think they they the conditioning is, I'm going to get my sense of security through the man, through being with him.
Okay.
But women can also find the security within,
Right.
emotional security.
Right.
So for men, validation can be sourced within, and for women, the sense of safety within can also be sourced with deep healing plus spirituality.
Yes.
So then everyone is coming in touch with their wholeness. We are no longer codependently trying to rely on each other in unhealthy ways.
Right.
That's like the child in us trying to reach out. Instead of the child in us trying to reach out and outsourcing an unmet need from the other person, which creates a codependent dynamic. How about I look at the child within me? I look at him because the child is looking for me. The
Right.
child is not really looking for the other person on the outside. The child has always been looking for me. But can I turn towards him? Because that's the biggest turning. Can
Hmm.
I turn towards him? And if my partner is doing the same, wow, this is like I'm coming home to myself.
Right.
She's coming home to herself. Well, that's sacred intimacy within. And from that place, we can support each other in that journey of individual healing. We can also bring our adult presence to each other as love,
Mm-hmm.
as support, as respect and kindness and depth. Because the child in us is not where the depth comes from. The child in us is an agitated energy. The child in us is the wounding.
Right.
Yeah, right? When I can take
Absolutely.
care of that child in me, everything
Absolutely.
shifts. And my partners, it's not my partner's responsibility to take care of the child in me. It's my responsibility. She
It's
can be there as a supportive presence, compassionate, even if I'm acting out. But it's primarily my responsibility is to take care of the child in me.
and how does that happen for the average person? I mean, I see how it evolves through people who are, able to embrace it and expand upon it. But for the average person to turn towards their child, what would you suggest?
Yeah. I think working with someone is hugely important, even if it's like once a week, weekly sessions,
Okay.
working with somebody where within that container of a healthy relationship with a psychotherapist, you can learn about how to be there for yourself.
Right.
Yeah, just like the therapist is holding space in that moment for the client, it's the same space holding that the client ends up doing for the child in them. There's a direct mirroring of that.
Right.
But the child in us is most obvious when we become reactive, or when we suddenly shut down, or suddenly I get really mean with my partner, or suddenly I feel super lonely even though I'm surrounded by people, or I feel extremely hopeless. I feel numb, depressed, collapse. All of these moments are the child in me taking over.
And so how do you balance that? What would be a tool to balance that?
Well, what I do is first I take a deep breath.
Right.
Okay, just to come back, just to come back. The feet on the floor. Here's the breath. Okay, right now I feel collapsed.
Right.
Right now, even a tiny bit of awareness. That's what, spiritual practice here is profoundly helpful.
Right.
If I already have a meditative practice, if I already meditated 20 minutes that morning, it's a lot more likely that I'm going to recognize when this collapse happens, when the sudden panic or fear happens.
Right.
Because from my meditation in the morning, I'm more in tune already with myself.
Absolutely.
Or any other embodiment practice, going to the gym, different physical things, yoga, so that we are more in tune with our body, energy, emotions. When there's a big shift in us, we can recognize that more easily. It's huge.
It
Even a
is.
tiny bit of awareness in the middle of a heated conflict. If I can just recognize that I'm being aggressive instead of simply angry, if I can recognize that for 1 second, then I can put it to neutral, right? I
Right.
can just take a step back and I can take a breath. I can look into my partner's eyes instead of continuing with my self-righteousness or maybe, being mean in that moment. Or shutting down and that is another one. When we shut down, we are not relational. We're no longer available for connection. That's also a very big conditioned thing for a lot of men. We
Right.
shut down quite often. We go into our heads because we get overwhelmed, by the emotion maybe that our partner is expressing. We get overwhelmed, we get flooded,
Right.
and we go into our heads and we get defensive. That's another one, defensiveness.
Mm-hmm.
If these patterns continue, relationships get hurt.
Right.
The we space, the us, the safety cannot deepen anymore. The trust is broken more. Repair is not happening.
And in regard to the self-destructive pieces that the child in us can bring up, how can
Yeah.
we encourage more of the like self-awareness? Because basically it shows up as, the more self-aware we are, we can stop our patterns, we can stop that, freight train running at full speed. We can, pause our anger. We can take a breather. It's that self-awareness piece.
Yes.
Um,
And I think in a lot of relationships, couples, they turn a corner when they become more receptive to each other's feedback in the moment.
right,
If I'm kind of losing myself, the child in me is taking over, and maybe I'm shutting down or being unnecessarily edgy with my tone or whatever. And if I have somehow allowed my romantic partner from a previous agreement that we have to say something to me in that moment, or maybe the agreement is that if she gets hurt, she just says, ouch. And when she says ouch, or anybody says ouch, either me or her, during a moment of conflict, if we agree to just stop and take a breath,
right.
for example, what an incredibly beautiful practice. And if both people are receptive to each other's ouch in that moment,
Yes,
well, we are much closer to remembering that we love each other.
that's right. That's right. It's the sacred
So these
connection.
are the ways exactly the sacredness can come back.
Right.
Because all the child in me is the self-righteous, entitled part of me. Suddenly, I can be aware of that and stop my ritual, unconscious ritual,
Right.
yeah, of
Ouch is a
selfish
great
self-centeredness.
ouch is a great timeout. That's a great word for like timeout.
Yeah,
It really is.
totally.
It's because if you can respect that in one another, it's just a real easy way to just shift. Maybe you need, someone needs to go take a walk or think about it, or you need a break from one another. These things happen,
Yeah, definitely.
but I
And
really,
then again, we get in touch with the vulnerability in that moment, right? Once we
yes,
come out of the reactivity, then the deeper truth is, I'm scared. The deeper truth is, oh, I feel ashamed right now, or I feel so hurt,
right,
or since 2 days I feel so lonely and I didn't know how to tell you that. And in my confusion about how to tell you that, I got aggressive. I'm so sorry.
right, right.
Suddenly the vulnerability comes and we are closer to each other because we are transparent now.
Absolutely, absolutely. And
And we can see that in each other's eyes, right? We can see the humanity in each other's eyes at that point.
how we were talking about how our spiritual practice is a benefit during these awarenesses and awakenings and deepenings, but there's also a lot of spiritual bypassing. And tell us a little bit about how that can become an obstacle for us.
Yes, and I think, a truly healthy relationship is somehow designed by the universe to make sure that we are not able to bypass anything anymore,
Yes, yes,
right?
great,
Because of its capacity to bring up things so quickly in a way that we just cannot escape it anymore. It's just right up to our face. But spiritual bypassing can happen in so many ways. I mean, even through these manifesting teachings, everybody's trying to manifest their
right,
soulmate these days.
right,
I'm not so sure about that.
right. I'm with you on that, James.
Because if I think that the soulmate is this one other soul in the entire universe with 8 billion individuals, if I'm waiting hopelessly or with some toxic hopefulness, a
Right.
lot of desperation for that one special somebody to come and save me, take away all my problems, well, that's the love of Hollywood. That's the love that
That's right. What do you
has never
believe?
worked anywhere.
That's right. Absolutely. Amen on that one.
Right? That's like the biggest lie. It sells books, it sells shows, it sells this and that, but
Yes.
it's such a delusion, and
Yes.
it's the very definition of the child in us living our lives as us.
Yes.
Because the child who never had the parents he always wanted is finally trying to find them in the form of a romantic partner that will finally give me everything. All my unmet needs will finally get fulfilled. But my unmet needs are from my childhood. My partner has nothing to do with them.
Right.
It's not the responsibility of my partner to fulfill all my unmet needs and traumas from that I carry from my childhood. It is not their responsibility. It is my responsibility to do my healing, to be there for my own wounding. And so I think sacred intimacy becomes possible only when we are not waiting for the special somebody anymore. We're just not waiting.
Right.
And we are also aware that we are not special. When
Yes.
specialness ends, when trying to get somewhere ends, finally, sacred intimacy becomes possible. When we are really here, here and now, right here, fully, single or partnered, doesn't matter. Because sacred intimacy is much more about where we are functioning from, the kind of energy and consciousness we are able to embody. It's much more about that than our partner.
Yes. Right.
And it's not even about me as an individual so much or her as an individual. It's also about the quality of relationship that we create.
Right. What's
So
it?
we are not looking for that special somebody, but maybe we can say we have a longing for a particular type of relationship.
Right. This is the plan.
Yes. So a lot of people I find they have a deep longing for sacred intimacy,
And they don't know
this
what it
type of
is.
relationship. Yeah.
Right. Right. Right.
So then the adventure, the journey, the path, if we have to call it, can become how can I become more ready for that?
Absolutely.
So that when the possibility arises, I'm not going to sabotage the relationship as much as I used to. I'm not going to show up as self-centered that, I'm going to show up more maturely. I'm going to show up in healthier ways.
Right.
I'll keep my eyes open. So if there's red flags, I'll be able to talk about them with this person that I'm getting to know
I think that
so
that's
that I can be more grounded, right? Yeah.
absolutely. It's a beautiful concept to introduce in a world that's really needing to interact more intimately, closely, sacredly. um
Yes.
it's a different way. I mean, there's people who I have found in my life who are more innately attuned to this than others. And in those relationships it seems to blossom or become a good friendship pretty easily when you both can connect on the same vulnerability and openness. um
Hmm.
and that's that piece that's really an important movement in moving forward in our relationships. But it doesn't even have to be our intimate relationships. It could even be our parental relationships, our child relationships, our friendships. It's the intimacy
Yes.
of that vulnerability, right?
Exactly. And you know how in Zen they say intimacy with the 10,000 things. It's literally with our lived experience. The intimacy is everywhere.
Yes.
These days I talk to people about the spiritual things that are happening to me from the breaking open of the very human heart, from this tenderness and vulnerability. And it's been happening through grief because somehow a lifetime of grief has been coming to the surface for me.
Okay.
For whatever reason, I can never fully explain, but the past 12 months, and it's so intense, but the grief and the tears break open the heart. In that moment, everything is intimate, and I feel like I'm being suffocated by universal love. I'm being, I told a friend the other, I said, I feel like I'm being cornered by love, and it's not letting me go anywhere. And what it's doing is it's bringing up seemingly everything that is not itself. It's bringing up to the surface toxic shame, all the unworthiness of an entire life, that maybe a few lives, and the Jewishness, the heritage, and all that, everything, all the
Generational.
unworthiness, all the generational traumas are
Okay.
coming to the surface. All the fears are coming to the surface because universal love is trying to align everything with as itself. So it's bringing out, it's like being squeezed, the last drop of the toothpaste.
Wow.
You squeeze the whole thing to
Right.
get the last drop out. That's what that's what it feels like,
Oh, wow.
being completely crushed by divine love, because it wants to establish itself in this human being. But
Okay.
for that to happen, everything has to be faced. There's no
Right.
other way.
Right.
Everything that is not vibrating at that frequency of profound openness and
Right.
freedom has to be faced and seen and worked through, and has to be seen also as love,
And,
also as that, also
in-
as God.
interestingly, I just flashed on it again. This is what, Jesus was trying to teach as well, is this
Mhm.
without even, using the terminology, but it's this level, this depth of love.
Yeah, and I think there's this, he says something in the Bible, and I know some things, I haven't read the book, but the, what was it? The heaven, the kingdom of God is spread upon the earth, and men don't see it, right? People
Yes.
don't see it, but it
Yeah.
really is spread upon the earth. It is within our very experience of this life in every moment. It's within our very perceiving, it's within our very senses, and its very sensitivity of this
And,
human instrument.
we
It's
look
all vibrating with love.
at all these, spiritual leaders throughout different religions, and they're all saying the same thing, and they've all been saying the same thing for centuries, and it's exactly what you're saying here. It's that level of, you know of vulnerability, of trust, of faith within soul, and being able to connect on that level. It's a beautiful awakening to look at love in this dimension, because it's, like you had referred earlier, we have adopted this perception of love that's become like a Hollywood or vision, of what love is. And
Yes.
it never works. We should learn
No.
that never works.
And
Um,
in that codependent pattern, it's like there's a wall of China around the couple. It's
yes,
us versus the world.
that's
Well,
true.
that so much suffocation, that's so suffocating. It's like half and half trying to become one together. But what if I could be one, get in touch with my wholeness, with my completeness as a human being of my own right? And if the other person is doing that with one and one, it's not like this kind of modern love, oh, I don't need you.
Right.
Oh, give me my space, and all we talk about is space. That's the other extreme. But how about 1 + 1 = infinite in sacred intimacy? Because that's exactly what happens. This relationship is not even about the two people. This relationship is about the entire existence ultimately.
That's true.
Because by getting close to each other, seeing each other's humanity and tenderness, and through the co-sharing, the shared journey of healing, these individuals get infinite. They
Yes.
connect with the entire human race, the entire humanity, because it's through my own humanity that I can feel other people's humanness. Through my vulnerability and getting in touch with my deepest fears, I cannot even believe it sometimes that I think it's the first time I'm saying it. I have finally started, I'm almost 40 years old. I have finally started to really understand women's experience of not feeling safe in this really harsh world, because I'm getting in touch with my own fears.
Right.
If I don't know my own fears, I lose the opportunity of understanding an entire gender, 50% of the world.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's a wonderful
I right? I lose
awareness.
that opportunity. I feel disconnected
Right.
from 50% of the world's population just by not getting in touch with my own fears. Thank God that is not possible anymore, because everything's coming up.
Right. But this is, we're talking about a generation, a gender that is shifting perceptions, beliefs, and acceptances within themselves. um,
Hmm.
Men being vulnerable is a new concept, and it's not necessarily a comfortable concept, but a concept that needs to be evolved so that we can become supportive in our relationships equally, that we can
Yeah,
evolve, one
it's
another.
so needed.
Yes, yes. It's you're doing such important, wonderful work, Jenk. I'm so incredibly
Thank you.
moved by it. You're welcome. Um, how can the audience get in touch with you? Um, if they're seeking out your expertise.
These days everything is on Instagram, and I and I am also there now.
Okay,
So I finally gave in and created an account
I
and, putting things
understand.
there.
I understand that. I
Yeah.
understand that part. Yes.
Even though I'm from the Instagram generation, I've never been really interested in that. So, but now I have it, and there's a lot in there, little clips and this and that. So it's looking more and more beautiful. And so that's probably the best, easiest way,
Okay.
using just my name and last name. So
Okay.
CENK, Matalon, MATALON. The other one is the website, which is the same, cenkmatalon.com.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being on Unlimited Realities, Jenk. This has been a great
Thank you.
conversation.
Yes, for the beautiful time and beautiful questions. Thank
I,
you so
I,
much,
I
Lisa.
loved this. This is really special, and I look forward to having you on in the future. And I really want to explore this a little bit more. We'll talk and discuss.
Okay. Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jank. I really appreciate this. This was a great show. And thank you, audience, for tuning in to Unlimited Realities. Thank you for listening to Jank Matalon, Somatic Psychotherapist. He has a wealth of wisdom and information, and such a beautiful soul in expressing sacred intimacy. Thank you again. God bless you all. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Thank you. Bye bye.